The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com.
Welcome to the David Pakman Show. It is the 11-year anniversary since the September 11 attacks. Last year, for the 10th anniversary show, we did an entire retrospective with a number of different guests and experts, members of Congress, members of the military, and so many others. I encourage you to go back and check that out. I don't think that indefinitely we need to do 9/11 specials, so we won't today, Louis, because there is so much other news to get to.
Yeah, you can just go back and check out last year's. It was very comprehensive.
And certainly every year we do think about what happened that year, and just because it's not wall-to-wall media coverage anymore doesn't mean that we're any more removed from the horrors of that day. I know I wrote in the newspaper last year about where I was on that day.
Right.
Let's talk about what's going on with Pat Robertson. Pat Robertson's back in the news for a couple of different things. First of all, Mitt Romney decided that it would be a good idea to campaign alongside Pat Robertson. That's weird in and of itself. But
it is a good idea.
Well, maybe it's a good idea for President Obama.
No, it's a good idea for Romney.
I disagree. I really don't know that it is.
Of course it is. It's a great idea.
Let's assume that it is. Why did he go and start implying that, unlike if President Obama is reelected, Mitt Romney isn't going to remove God from American coins? Interesting, because I don't remember President Obama campaigning on removing God from American coins. That being said, look at, if you're watching the video here, look at Pat Robertson there in the background, smiling away as Mitt Romney talks about, he's not going to remove God from our coins. Paramount issue.
Yeah, apparently this is Pat Robertson's #1 concern with our country.
Here we go.
That pledge says, under God, I will not take God out of the name of our platform.
Right. Okay. Crowd likes that. And Pat Robertson now standing.
I will not take God off our coins, and I will not take God out of my heart. We're a nation.
Well, Louis, if you were worried about President Obama taking God off of our coins, you know that if Mitt Romney is elected president, he's not going to do it. I know you were really worried about that happening.
I was terrified. I had night terrors all last night. Good to know. Good to know. I think I'll actually vote this election, and I'll vote for Romney now.
I mean, this is like saying President Obama is going to cause an alien invasion of Earth, right? It's just, where is Mitt Romney coming up with this stuff? No idea.
I don't know, but he does need to rally the support of the evangelical Christians.
Yeah, and you think hanging out with Pat Robertson and saying stuff like this will help?
I can't think of a better way.
Well, good for him.
I know. We think it's crazy,
but Louis, the question is, will it be a net gain? In other words, can he really win by riding on the evangelical vote and
well, he's not riding on it, but
alienating the, I don't know, moderate vote? We don't know. Maybe he can. Maybe that's a winning strategy. We're not exactly sure what it's going to take for Romney to win.
I don't think he can, but I think this can only help.
So then on to Pat Robertson. Now, Pat Robertson campaigning with Mitt Romney. Pat Robertson, a very, very disturbed individual who has recommended all sorts of insane and very, very he gives a lot of advice that really would lead to the ruining of a lot of people's lives rather than the betterment. He gets an email, and again, we never know if the emails that Pat Robertson gets are somebody trolling Pat Robertson or if they're for real. But that being said, let's assume this is a real email. A guy emails in saying that he is having trouble with his wife. Pat Robertson recommends, why don't you become a Muslim, move to Saudi Arabia, and then beat your wife? That's Pat Robertson's prescription for improving this marriage. Take a listen to this, ladies and gentlemen.
This first one comes from Michael, who says, my wife has become a real problem. She has no respect for me as the head of the house. She insults me. She even went as far as stretching her hand to beat me. I've lost my self-confidence. Her words hurt so much, and she refuses to talk through our problems. Please tell me what I can do.
Right.
Well, you could become a Muslim, then you could beat her.
There you go.
But in lieu of that.
You don't want to go to Saudi Arabia?
No.
You know, I think this man's got to stand up to her, and he can't let her get away with this stuff.
Let's stop it there. He can't let her get away with this stuff. Number one, what stuff are you talking about? Like, what on earth is...
Well, he's talking about the verbal and physical abuse.
But he's saying this email, it could be... We've heard many times, right, from male abusers. Listen, my wife was getting out of line. She was yelling at me. she stretched her hand to hit me. What does that mean? She stretched her hand. And Pat Robertson, without knowing anything about what's going on in this guy's life, is saying, listen, you can't let her get away with that stuff, which gets us to what, ladies and gentlemen? It gets us where Pat Robertson talks like the husband is kind of like the parent, of course. And the woman, the wife, is always kind of like the child. She can't be allowed to get away with things, Lewis. The husband needs to reprimand the wife and make sure that she's raised in a disciplined way. She can't. She's the woman, Lewis. She can't get away with stuff.
I don't know. I didn't get that from what he said.
It's Pat Robertson's entire career that's built on that idea. I mean, Natan, what do you think of this?
Yeah, I think Pat Roberts. I mean, first of all, the reference to Islam is completely absurd.
That really should be the focal point of this conversation,
which we'll get back to.
So that was absurd. Just the idea that simply by virtue of claiming to be a Muslim, you're going to beat your wife,
and that it's okay then.
Exactly. But then separately from that, I completely agree with you, Dave, on this. This is what he's said for years, decades.
Pat Robertson has built a career, a multi-million-dollar industry based on, in part, the idea that women can't get out of line and men need to keep them in line. Let's keep listening.
You know, I don't know. I don't think we condone wife beating these days, but something's got to be done to make her
physically.
There we go. You know, I don't know.
Now that adds a little different tone to this.
I just don't know that we condone wife beating, which, if we did, would be a perfectly reasonable way of resolving this dispute. But you got to figure out some way to solve this thing, Lewis.
That changes things.
Mitt Romney has to denounce him, right? I mean, he was just seen on a stage with this guy, and he's now saying, well, you know, it would be great if you could beat your wife because you got to keep her in line because as the husband, you're kind of the guy in charge. But we don't really condone that these days. Where's Mitt Romney? Where's Mitt Romney denouncing Pat Robertson? I haven't seen it.
It's not like this is the thing Pat Robertson says that makes Mitt Romney need to denounce him. We could play 10 shows of audio clips from Pat Robertson on things that would make him denounce worthy.
Right.
But that this is mild compared to some of the stuff he says.
However, time-wise, it corresponds with this guy being on stage with Mitt Romney.
I still think it can only help Romney to campaign with Pat Robertson and to have his endorsement.
All right, well, if there's any more indication that the Republican, right-wing, conservative, Tea Party, extremist, whatevers are really getting frantic and desperate over the very possibility, the very real possibility that Mitt Romney might not beat Barack Obama in the November election, we're now seeing things like, for example, this clip of Rush Limbaugh saying that there will be economic collapse if President Obama is reelected. Let's take a look at what Rush Limbaugh had to say about this, Lewis.
How long do you think this country has as of? Let me ask you this: how long does this country have if Obama wins? We are headed toward an economic collapse, and we are the leader of the world. When it happens to us, there are reverberations all over the world. It's not like some podunk little European country collapsing.
Right. So let's analyze this. First of all, there's so many layers here. We could do a week of shows on just that 30-second clip from Rush Limbaugh. Because first of all, podunk European countries. That's layer one. Let's put that aside. This fear-mongering, first of all, is fear-mongering about if President Obama is elected. But then number two is that any idiot who has any idea what's been going on in this country the last 3.5 years and what went on in this country economically the 8 years prior to that would know that suggesting that if Obama is reelected, that there's going to be an economic collapse goes against every economic indicator. And you know what? Later today, where's the book? Later today, we're going to be talking to Bob Detrick, who wrote a book about exactly this. So we'll get the facts. Stocks today, again, hitting an all-time high. Corporate profits, all-time high. Jobs being recovered. Look at the rate of job loss and now job gains that we're seeing compared to when George W. Bush was in office. Look at any economic graph and color code it for when Obama took over and tell me where from that you get that there's a chance of an economic collapse if President Obama is reelected. Is Rush uninformed or is he just fear-mongering to others who are uninformed?
He's Rush Limbaugh. He's fear-mongering. This is his entire strategy.
Oh, okay. Good to know.
Right?
Yeah. I mean, who knows what he's doing?
doesn't really matter if
he's treating
informed or
people
not.
like idiots.
It doesn't
That's the
matter
thing.
if he's informed or not.
When you
because-
watch Rush say this stuff, he's treating you like an idiot. He's treating you like you don't know what the reality is of the economy. Incredible. One other story I want to get to. There's been a fatal border shooting where a U.S. Border Patrol agent fired across the border and killed a Mexican citizen. It's all alleged, but there is video and there's a number of eyewitnesses, although we know eyewitness testimony is not always individually the most reliable. The FBI and Border Patrol are investigating this. What apparently happened is that there was a U.S. agent patrolling the Rio Grande who was in a boat. He fired his weapon across the border because somebody was throwing rocks at him from the Mexican side of the river shore. And the U.S. Border Patrol agent shot and killed the man. Now, there's a number of different issues here. Number one is legally what happens in this case. Number two is a shooting appropriate use of force when someone is throwing rocks at you? Now, we're going to get to some video of this. I actually got on the phone today with a friend of mine who's a Border Patrol agent in this area, and asked him, what is the deal with the rock throwing? What's your reaction to this? And he said, well, listen, rock throwing can mean any number of things. If there's someone across the border throwing pebbles at you, shooting them is not an appropriate retaliation. At the same time, if you have someone from an elevated position who's throwing pretty heavy rocks at you, you really have no intermediate force that you can use. Firing a warning shot first is probably the appropriate thing, and then shooting back is not totally inappropriate given that you may be out there by yourself. You don't know what's going on. You don't know if they're trying to draw you in or hit your boat so that you're stopped and then you get shot. You don't know. You're out there by yourself and you're not there to be assaulted. That's not what your job is. So that being said, our friend indicated that discretion must be used, and that in any case, any time there is one of these shootings, that there is an investigation and that it's not just lackadaisical and nobody cares. That being said, Lewis, let's get to some of this video here. The story that's being told by local media is that what was taking place here was that people started yelling from the Mexican shoreline that the individual who was illegally trying to swim across or in the river was in danger of being drowned if the U.S. Border Patrol boat continued approaching him. The rock throwing and yelling started as a result of that, and then the shots came. So initially, let's take a look at this here. And I apologize for this audio. This is the noise that the boat makes. What we can see here is the boat approaching, and this is being filmed from the Mexican side. And the boat continuing to approach. And as you can see, people are kind of looking to see what's going on there. Then things get really crazy when things continue to escalate, and this is when the shots were fired and people start screaming. Let's get to that part. And a big commotion starts. Let's get a little more audio from this, Lewis. And then the boat takes off. So there are conflicting testimonies about this. One is that as soon as the shots came from the U.S. Border Patrol side, the U.S. it was yelled that they had killed a man. Border Patrol basically just disappeared. Others say that Border Patrol retreated because of the rock throwing that was taking place. I really don't know what to think about this. On the one hand, is shooting someone an appropriate retaliation for rocks being thrown? On the other hand, you throw rocks at people with guns, what do you think is going to happen? On the other hand, there's a lot of ways to look at this.
Yeah, we have no idea what was going through the head of the person here. I know, like our friend said, you okay there?
Yeah.
He was on level ground, and, you know, obviously these people were not throwing massive boulders 40, 50 feet onto this boat. Impossible, judging by the video. So I doubt these rocks were very big.
What about the argument of self-defense and of a third person? In other words, that the man in the river would be drowned or run over by the boat itself, and that the rocks were thrown to try to move the boat away, if you will?
I don't think there was the goal of the agent to drown the man in the river. He was probably just trying to grab him. I don't think that he was intentionally trying to kill him there. And if there's a risk of the man drowning, distracting the guy in the boat by throwing rocks at him is probably the last thing you want to do.
What do you think about this? I want to hear what you have to say. We're going to keep an eye on the investigation and see what's determined. Email us. Go to our website, davidpakman.com. Contact us, or through Twitter, Facebook, or YouTube, any of that stuff. What do you think about this one? Let us know. Comment on the video on YouTube as well. On today's bonus show, we'll talk about the alleged real cost of that electric Chevy Volt, and General Motors now disputing that, as well as how the Taliban is using pictures of attractive women in social media to gain information from the U.S. and its allies, and plenty more. You've got to get the bonus show. davidpakman.com/membership.
David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com. Welcome back to the David Pakman Show.
I've got a new member of the day to tell you about today, made possible in part by liberalbias.com. Not only do we have liberals here on Earth, but now you have to worry about liberal bias in space. Distant galaxies are mocking conservative values and tricking scientists into thinking that the universe is millions of years old. Of course, we know, Lewis, it's only 6,000 years old. You can find out more about outer space liberal bias at liberalbias.com. Today's new member of the day, Lewis, Elka Smith. Elka Smith is a new David Pakman Show member, and it's absolutely fantastic to have Elka aboard. And thank you so much to Elka and to all David Pakman Show members.
It's an interesting name, Elka.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I wonder what the ethnic origin of that is.
I have no idea.
Very good. Let's follow up on circumcision. We had a story a couple of weeks ago. I like the picture. We had a story a couple of weeks ago about circumcision, and a new study which said that we now have determined that the risks of circumcision do not outweigh what are the benefits in terms of reduced urinary tract infections, lower risk of STDs, etc. Now, we had an incredible amount of feedback about this, people saying the study itself was flawed because it was really heavily skewed towards African countries that aren't aware enough of proper hygiene techniques for uncircumcised genitals. A lot of different questions, a lot of accusations that Lewis is an idiot, even though he said people who think that female genital mutilation being like circumcision means they are idiots. And there were a lot of ad hominems being thrown around. Is that fair?
Yeah, there were.
Absolutely. Thank you, Lewis.
Yeah.
So we got a ton of feedback about this, and let's just start with a couple things. Number one, I got a voicemail about circumcision. Let's take a listen to that one first.
Hey, David. I just wanted to make a comment about the circumcision story you did. Full disclosure, I am Jewish. So I just wanted to say, as a fellow Jew,
Let me stop it right there. Is that a problem right there, guys, with this discussion? That it's being why does he have to disclose that he's Jewish?
Because when you do, there is the presumption that you are circumcised.
Okay, but so there is also the idea that we can't just have a fact-based discussion about circumcision, that it is tinged by whether you are Jewish or Muslim or whatever.
No, it's tinged by whether you're circumcised or not.
No,
So,
I disagree. I think that the problem with this is that it makes it seem like this guy might believe what he believes only because he's religious.
Right.
well, anyway, let's continue.
Let's continue.
guys may be subconsciously biased to be circumcision. Case in point, Natan brings into the debate the fact that there's a long tradition. I just feel like that should not be brought into the debate. The debate should be based purely on medical science and facts, not on religion. And so, yeah, that's basically what I want to say. In fact, I'd even go so far as to say that parents who choose to have the circumcision done based on purely on religious reasons, I think that might be a good debate. You know, that should be wrong. Like it should be done, in my mind, purely for medical reasons. And if it is being done for religious reasons, at the very least, we can agree that removing healthy erogenous tissue permanently from somebody should only be done for scientific and medical purposes, and religion should play no part in that kind of procedure.
Okay, so Natan, what's your reaction to that?
So let me just start out by saying I'm not very passionate about this issue. I think it's pretty much a non-issue overall. I don't think it's very important. However,
in what sense? In that if people want to have their children circumcised, they do, and if they don't, they don't.
Well, what I'll say is the following. The tradition argument or the religion argument is a valid one in this case. It's not in itself a reason to support something, because there could be horrible things that religions do because of Scripture. It's relevant because since there isn't any scientific evidence, that there's no consensus that says that circumcision damages the body, there's no consensus, then we should err on the side of conservatism and let people do what they want. That's what I'm saying.
Lewis?
Okay, that's fair. Yeah.
Okay, I'll continue and then you'll react to the next thing. Then I got a email from Pamela saying, listen, I have a female perspective on this. Circumcision should be mandatory. It's cleaner, it's more hygienic, and let's face it, it's more attractive. So Pamela, as a female, taking the aesthetic point of view on circumcision, Lewis, what do you think about that? Do you is that almost considering circumcision like a plastic surgery procedure?
I mean, it sounds like the more attractive part is just an opinion here. I mean, she's basically saying it's cleaner and more hygienic, right, which I believe to be true. We also receive many emails from women saying that it shouldn't be done. So either way, I mean, very good. It's just another email. But
that it shouldn't be done, not because of the aesthetic point of view. This was the one email we got.
That it's torture and results in millions of deaths.
So the last thing I want to get to is Brad from Tarzana sent me a kind of hypothetical morality with motamity type question, which is this. I think it would be a perfect time to propose to Lewis, since he is so dismissive of the brutality and thinks people who compare circumcision to female circumcision are idiots. I would agree that there is a difference between the two. For this scenario, we'll assume all health benefits from the study we cited are true. For this example, here's the example. A 12-year-old orphan is adopted by a family who decide that they want to have him circumcised for the medical benefits. The boy is adamant that he doesn't want the procedure done, but his parents are resolute in their decision. Is this child abuse?
No.
Why not?
A 12-year-old does not know what's best for him.
Okay,
and is still a minor. And is still...
Up until what age do the parents get to decide whether the kid has a circumcision or not?
Well, I'd say when you're legally an adult, but at the same time, I might say something like 16, 15, 16.
So you're 16 years old, your parents say it's time to be circumcised, you have no say because you're not a legal adult.
It's tough. I mean, there are different maturity levels here too. I mean, it's hard to draw that line.
Natan, how do you even process this question?
I completely think that it's very hard to draw this line, but I also think that the difficulty in drawing the line doesn't mean that we should ban circumcision.
Okay.
Yeah. Well put.
Fair enough. Let's keep the comments coming. This is a fascinating discussion. And before we move on to our interview, we happen to have another penis-related story. This is incredible, Lewis. A Florida man accidentally shot himself in the penis and testicles while claiming to be cleaning his gun. An 18-year-old man named Michael Smeriglio shot himself in the penis and testicles at a party in Port St. Lucia, Florida, while cleaning a recently purchased gun. This is very strange to me for a number of reasons. Because, number one, why is everyone always cleaning their guns? Like, it seems to be so common to claim you're cleaning your gun.
Well, you don't really need to clean it unless you use it.
Well, that's the thing. Whenever someone does something really stupid with a gun, the claim is always they were cleaning the gun. Now, someone who knows more about guns than I do said this guy wasn't cleaning his gun. He was practicing quick draws from his waistband, and he hit the trigger as he pulled it out and shot himself in the penis.
Probably, because it's highly unlikely that your gun was loaded while you were cleaning it. You would literally there would have to be something seriously wrong with you if that were the case. I mean, could it be that he was just like polishing the outside and was kind of holding it down like this?
Is that normal?
It's not normal. It's stupid. But I would say that he was probably practicing quick draws.
Well, listen, we need more guns, as conservatives say. Everyone would be safer if we had more guns. For example, if this man's penis had been carrying its own gun, it would have been able to defend itself by standing its ground in accordance with Florida law.
Or if he was wearing one of those special penile flak jackets.
Would you say that this guy was kind of going off half-cocked?
That's good.
We could say that his gun probably had a hair trigger. Is that fair?
The other one was better.
All right, very, very weird. Sad anytime anyone gets shot. But again, a lot of gun cleaning going on. Why does the gun have to be cleaned so much? It's just very strange. And why is it pointing at people's penis?
Well,
you have to clean your junk.
You should keep it clean so that it is in proper working order.
This story is kind of related to the circumcision story and cleanliness and hygiene in some way, in more ways than I think we're aware of.
This was a little bit more than your average circumcision.
Okay, let's take a break. Great interview coming up after the break with Bob Detrick. Stay tuned. Facebook.com/David Pakman Show. Join us on Facebook. A lot of behind-the-scenes pictures on there. Back after this.
The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com. Welcome back to the David Pakman Show.
Joining me is Bob Detrick, co-owner of Polaris Financial Partners in Columbus, Ohio, and also co-author of Bulls, Bears, and the Ballot Box, which I have right here, co-written by Bob as well as Lou Goldfarb. Bob, as you know, we talked about your book a couple of weeks ago on the show, and it's fascinating to me because I've been making the case based on the numbers that I've looked at for many, many years, that number one, stocks perform far better under Democratic presidential administrations than Republican ones, and job creation seems to do better under Democratic presidential administrations than Republican. Now, in the book, you go not only into stocks and job creation, but you actually look at its 11 or 12 economic indicators comparing party in the White House. Tell us a little bit about the book, and then we'll get into the specifics.
Well, the book really is about this notion that we believe that individuals need to focus on voting for their wallet or voting for their pocketbook as opposed to voting on all the hyperbole and nonsense that's out there sometimes. We really do believe that people ought to vote for their IRA or their 401k or their 403b plan or for their son or daughter's 529 plan if they're going to college. That kind of is the cornerstone of the book, is that people need to vote in their economic interest, David.
So let's start. I think the best place to start is with what's been in the news so much in this presidential campaign. Talk a little bit about jobs and the history of job creation across presidential administrations.
Well, if we look at job creation over the last 80 years, in fact, this is an interesting tidbit that Bill Clinton spoke about in the beginning of his speech last Wednesday at the convention. Is that there have been considerably more jobs created with Democratic presidents in the White House than Republicans, and most people would never know that. At the end of the day, most people believe in this myth that Republicans are better stewards of the economy because they bring greater business acuity and acumen to the table. But the reality is that has not been the case. If we take a look at the last 80 years, we've actually had about 30 million jobs, 30 million more jobs created by Democratic presidents from FDR through Bill Clinton than we have with Republican presidents at the helm.
Okay, now how are you measuring that? Because where I think that, the numbers to me are pretty black and white. Where I've seen sometimes those on the right try to skew these numbers are by saying, well, you've really got to figure out how far after a president has left office do we still attribute those jobs to them as opposed to the successor, right? I mean, based on how long does it take policy to take effect. So how did you do that in the book?
Well, we don't believe in this notion of lag time. If you actually take a look at any CEO of a major company in this country, any manager of a baseball team, any head coach of a football team, regardless of the circumstances he or she may inherit, they're responsible for what happens on their watch. And we believe that is true too, or ought to be true too, for our president. This notion of lag time works very well if you're a Republican. If you want to have a 3 or 4 year lag time, the Republican numbers look much better than those with Democratic presidents. But we just believe that that's utter nonsense. In fact, what Republicans said in their convention 2 weeks ago, that all the governors stepped up on Tuesday night and said, we're responsible for what's happened in the last year and a half, 2 years. And we believe that that's true, that at the end of the day, the president needs to be responsible, good or bad, for what happens on his watch.
Let's talk a little bit about the stock market, because interestingly enough, last Thursday, on the day that President Obama actually gave that DNC closing speech, stocks, I believe it was the S&P 500, hit a 4-year high, or the highest point during President Obama's presidency. Today, I believe the Dow Jones Industrial Average is again expected to close at its highest level since, I want to say, 2007, if I'm not mistaken. Historically, what do the numbers look like in terms of stock market gains, looking at each party?
A good question. The Barack Obama has been beaten up on a lot of things, but at the end of the day, you certainly can't fault him for how well the stock market has performed since he came into office. By passing the stimulus bill, and that was a terrible name for it, in February of 2009, a few weeks later, we then finally established a floor in the market so the market didn't drop any further. Also, the auto rescue plan, which basically saved Chrysler and GM and General Motors, established a floor so the market didn't drop further. The market dropped as low as 676 on the S&P and as low as 6,700 and change on the Dow. We now stand today at 13,350 and change. We're up about 82 or 83 points as I speak, and the S&P is also up to its highest level since late October of 2007. So in less than 3.5 years, we saw the market more than double. That's only happened one other time in the last 80 years, and that was during the very beginning of FDR's administration.
So in a sense, it's fair to say that we've seen almost unprecedented stock market growth under President Obama.
That's correct, and we've seen record corporate profits also. One thing that Democrats or Republicans don't give him credit for is how well major corporations have done in the last 3.5 years. And we've seen some of the best corporate profits and corporate numbers on Wall Street that we've seen in history in the last 3.5 years since he took office.
It's fascinating because the book, and again, the book is Bulls, Bears, and the Ballot Box. We're speaking with Bob Detrick, who's one of the authors of the book. It's incredible because so many of the things that the book points out in black and white, just looking at numbers, are things that you would imagine, given the Republican narrative on what is a good indicator of whether the economy is doing well or not, would be things they would be touting. I mean, for example, we've heard from Republicans for a long time now that high corporate profits and high stock returns trickle down, so to speak, to the middle class and to the lower class. If anything, if you want to look at these numbers and then say, where are the jobs, even though that's a separate question, wouldn't it be proof that the trickle down isn't happening because we have record stock market gains and corporate profits?
Well, I think it's fair to say that the trickle-down theory is really the supply-side theory that Art Laffer came up with in the early 80s. And at the end of the day, part of what our book talks about, David, is this notion that if you're going to look at just one side of the equation, the supply side, if you're going to ignore the demand side of the equation altogether, you're making a huge mistake. What makes sense is when we have supply in equilibrium with demand, as close as possible. If you're going to just focus on the wealthier folks and not on the middle class, which has indeed been the backbone of this country for the last 60, 70, 80 years, again, a huge mistake's being made.
Now, as a financial advisor, your interest is in your clients doing well with their investments, right? So if there was evidence that they were doing really well under Republican policy and Republican administrations historically, certainly you would have no reason to hide that or to dilute those numbers because you're in the business of helping people make money. Is that right?
That's exactly right. And quite frankly, one of the reasons I decided that this book needed to be written, David, was in 2008 when we went through the second crash in as many years under George W. Bush. I thought it was important to get to the bottom of what had happened and why it had happened. At the end of the day, what I found, among many other things in our book, is that we've had 5 major crashes in the stock market in the last 80 years, from Herbert Hoover through George W. Bush. And at the end of the day, every single one of those, where the market has crashed 35% or more, happened with a Republican president at the helm. So what we have, unfortunately, is this series of boom and bust with Republican presidents. We seem to have a greater degree of consistency, predictability, and stability with Democratic presidents. And I think most of our clients do, in fact, want more consistency in their lives. And at the end of the day, we get that more with Democratic presidents.
All right, we've been speaking with Bob Detrick, co-author of Bulls, Bears, and the Ballot Box, which I have here with me, How Performance of Our Presidents Has Impacted Your Wallet. It's a great read. Really great to talk to you, Bob.
My pleasure, David. Thanks so much for having me on. I greatly appreciate it. Hope to be on again sometime.
Okay, let's take a break. Stay tuned. Still plenty more coming up on The David Pakman Show.
The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com. The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com.
Please support The David Pakman Show by becoming a member at davidpakman.com/membership. Pennies a day, a ton of great benefits, and it goes straight to supporting The David Pakman Show. Republican Congressman Roscoe Bartlett from Maryland says that federal student loans are really just a slippery slope that could lead all the way down that slope, must be Everest-sized slope, to a Holocaust. Very, very strange comments. Let's listen to what he had to say. Interesting stuff. The audio's not great. I apologize in advance.
Not that it's not a good idea to give students loans. It certainly is a good idea to give them loans. But if you can ignore the Constitution to do something good today, tomorrow you will be ignoring the Constitution to do something bad. You couldn't. There are more people in America today of German ancestry than any other, including the English. The Holocaust occurred in Germany. How in the heck could that happen? And when you start down the wrong road, it can be a very slippery slope.
What a weird thing. You go from talking about student loans to, to
ignoring the Constitution, to how many Germans live in our country, to the Holocaust.
Very strange. And plus, it's all irrelevant because we all know, Louis, if it's a legitimate Holocaust, the female body can just shut down the entire student loan, and that's it. That's the end of it. You don't even have to worry about it anymore.
Apparently, you can shut down the gas chamber, too.
Yeah, it shuts the whole thing down if it's not legitimate.
This could just be like senility or something like that. I don't know.
The other thing is, federal spending on education is constitutional, period. I mean, that's just it. If we want to engage him in his insanity, it is constitutional.
Not
and at
only
the
that.
What's that,
I was going to say one more thing. Not only is it constitutional, if he really thought it was unconstitutional, you can file a complaint, you can sue the government, and if it really is unconstitutional, it'll go up to the Supreme Court or an appeals court and actually be ruled unconstitutional.
Yeah, by all those liberal Supreme Court justices.
Well, that's what he would say.
Oh, wait a second. Right. Bartlett and House Republicans still voted to eliminate Pell Grants for more than 1 million students. The Republican Party has promised to undo the student loan reform signed into law by President Obama. What's a better example of stimulative spending than education for people who will then go on to be more productive in their lives, earn more money, pay more taxes, allow the U.S. to better compete worldwide? That sounds really horrible. Let's give tax cuts to rich people.
To be innovators, to be inventors, creators.
Yeah, let's give tax cuts to rich people instead.
Good idea.
That'll work. They'll just put it in the bank.
It'll just trickle down.
It'll trickle down to from the bank to interest in their same bank accounts. Big trickle.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
More like a drop.
Not even.
Into their own accounts.
Yeah.
It's an upward drop.
It is.
It's like a reverse gravity trickle.
It just stays right there. It doesn't actually move at all.
It's a zero gravity movement, exactly. Ohio inmate Michael Keenan has been freed after spending 24 years on death row waiting to be executed. He was freed after an Ohio judge dismissed the murder charge against him. Yet another one of these bizarre stories, Louis. We know, what do we know? Death penalty is not a deterrent. Texas man, innocent, was executed in the last few years. Not a deterrent. Texas man was executed, he was innocent. Not a deterrent. I mean, what else is there?
That's pretty much it.
A Catholic priest, this is an incredible story, who befriended, this is incredible. There were 2 people who were convicted here. It was Michael Keenan as well as John D'Ambrosio, okay? They were convicted of killing Tony Klan in 1988. They long maintained their innocence. Now, a Catholic priest befriended D'Ambrosio in prison and was convinced of his innocence. He worked with lawyers. They uncovered evidence that was favorable to both defendants that was withheld by county prosecutors. The evidence included police statements that concluded that Klan could not have been killed at the location where the only eyewitness said the killing took place. As we know, eyewitness testimony increasingly or particularly unreliable, but here even further than that, police hiding exculpatory evidence. So this is emblematic of the broader problems with the death penalty. 101 people between 1989 and 2012 were slated to be killed by their government before eventually being exonerated by evidence. Now, the thing is, some will say, well, listen, they were eventually exonerated. Yeah, that's in part because of the automatic appeals process, which allows for this information to be uncovered, and the slow, inefficient way that a lot of the prison systems operate, not because of any great virtue to of the system itself.
We know people have also been executed who were innocent as well.
Yeah, like the Texas guy we talked about.
Yeah, it happens.
Absolutely. Natan, you wanted to chime in on this?
No, this speaks for itself.
Oh, I thought you wanted to chime in.
No.
Okay. Good. No chiming in. Let's get to voicemail, Lewis. We've got one voicemail to play here. Of course, the voicemail line is open 24 hours a day. 219-2-DAVID-P. Call in. Leave us your voicemails. Let's take a listen to this.
Hey, David. Charles in New Jersey. I'm calling about, I guess, a couple topics. The first I want to talk about is the Romney-Ryan campaign. They go on and on about what America wants, about what America really wants, allegedly. Yet, whenever quizzed about gay marriage, their taxes, a lot of the latest hot-button issues, they go silent. Ann Romney says, "Oh, I don't want to talk about that. I don't want to get into that." Well, my thing is that if you truly believe that all these various minorities, gay, black, what have you, non-believer, atheist, if these people are truly a tiny sliver of the pie chart, and that you are truly speaking for, the bulk of America, then why are you so scared to open your mouth?
Yeah, well, listen, there's two things going on here. Number one is that when you ask people to respond to talking points and political strategist framings, like, for example, government-run healthcare, people respond negatively. When you ask people fairly, do you believe the government has a responsibility to provide everybody with a certain basic level of healthcare? People say yes, overwhelmingly, 66%, even more in some polls. So number one is, when you actually ask people about policy as opposed to buzzwords and political framings, Romney and Ryan don't represent what people want. The other side is that the Republican side has done a really good job of getting people to vote against their own best interests. So it's very clear what people want. It's just Republicans are getting you to vote against it.
It's a campaign of misinformation. But at the same time, we can't expect anyone who's speaking publicly to talk about anything other than their main talking points, which is what they're going to do every time.
No question about it. Absolutely. A couple of emails I got. On the topic of President Obama being bear-hugged, deadlifted, whatever you call it, by a Florida Republican who owns a pizza shop who is voting for Obama, you know that if he picked up Mitt Romney, there would have been security all over the guy because it would have been too gay in the eyes of the media. Yeah, you're probably right. You're probably right. And you know there will be a segment on Fox and Friends tomorrow with a caption under this that says, "Is Obama Muslim and gay?" Yeah, I didn't see that one, but it wouldn't make me bat an eyelash, Lewis, I'll tell you.
Right.
And apparently this guy's Yelp page is getting blasted by Republicans because of his treachery. There was a Huffington Post article about this today where the pizza shop that this guy owns is getting killed in the Yelp ratings because apparently Republicans don't like that this guy is saying, I'm a Republican and I voted for Obama in 2008 and I'm voting for him this time. Republicans not liking that.
They're probably all just unaware that he actually received more of a tax break than he would have under McCain.
Probably.
Yeah.
And 15% of Ohio Republicans crediting Mitt Romney instead of President Obama for the assassination of Osama bin Laden. Well, you know what they say, you can never underestimate the stupidity of an average American. I actually think that that's the wrong way to go about it. I think that if you really look at what Thomas Frank and many others have written about the importance of language, yeah, it's fine if we think that you've just got to be flat out stupid to say that, but making that accusation is not really going to help Democrats win. I think there needs to be a different strategy.
Probably.
And typical liberals don't want to credit Romney for something he didn't do. Unbelievable. Yeah, incredible, those dumb liberals. And the headline to this video could just as well have read 15% of Ohio Republicans are imbeciles. How could Romney have had any say in how bin Laden was pursued or killed? He was a governor, had no power over armed forces, and didn't deal with military strategy at all. Yeah, we get that, but I didn't even think it needed this much of an explanation. This is a perfectly accurate explanation. Of course, Romney wasn't actually governor when bin Laden was killed. But listen, let's be honest. If you don't realize why that poll result is absurd, reading a couple lines about it is not really going to help.
I still think that the majority of the people who put that down on this survey or
did
poll
it as a goof.
Did it as a goof, or did it because they could.
Become a David Pakman Show member so that the show doesn't end now, but you get the bonus show next Monday afternoon, 3:15 p.m. Eastern. We'll have a members video call-in. If you are a David Pakman Show member, you can join us after the show here in the studio. Ask us questions. We'll be hanging out with you on Spreecasts. Thanks to everybody for watching. See you on the bonus show or tomorrow afternoon.
The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com.